Shania Twain was the name on everyone's lips in the 90s. In fact, she recorded the best-selling album ever made by a woman. But then she disappeared almost from the face of the earth for 15 years. Why? Many people thought she only took that time out to heal from the sickness that threatened to take her voice away. But the truth is, what was going on underground was far more sinister than anyone could ever imagine. And in this video, we are going to spill the beans on all of that while we show you some of her rare photos. Shania Twain was born Eileen Regina Edwards on August 28, 1965, in Ontario, Canada. And from the second she entered this world, her life was one of inescapable tragedy, turmoil, and trauma. In fact, she literally had to fight for her life from the very moment she was born. While giving birth to her, Shania's mother endured a difficult and excruciatingly painful labor. Then, minutes after delivery, the doctor handed her a lit cigarette and told her that she had given birth to a lifeless baby. When she is finally delivered, there is no sound, no movement, no life. She's delivered a blue baby, stillborn. Miraculously, baby Shania came to life and caught her first breath in that smoke-filled delivery room. But if it was a miracle that saved her from death, there was no miracle to rescue her from life itself. Shania was raised in utter poverty. There was often not enough money for necessities like electricity, heating, or warm clothes for the children. And on too many cold nights, the children had to go to bed on empty stomachs. Shania even remembers how she would have to deal with a hungry, rummaging tummy at school, while all the other children around her had packed lunches. All she could do was look on as some of them even wasted their food. And whether out of pride or embarrassment, Shania felt forced to lie to her teachers when they asked her if she had anything to eat.
When my teacher would ask that, I would say, "Oh, I forgot it," or "It's in my locker."
Her way of dealing with the hunger pains was nothing short of heartbreaking. She immersed herself in music to distract herself from her harsh reality. But poverty and hunger were the least of her troubles. Her stepfather was a violent, abusive man. Growing up, she often witnessed how he would take his anger out on her mother, sometimes leaving her literally within inches of her life. Sadly, Shania's life away from home wasn't much better. At school, she was teased and mocked. One occasion was particularly traumatic. While singing in front of the class, the other kids started laughing at her, but it got even worse. The children's cruelty didn't end there. On the playground that afternoon, some of them ridiculed me, calling me a show-off. I couldn't understand it. From the youngest age, she loved playing, singing, and writing music. But being so relentlessly teased at school left a deep scar, and understandably, she was scared to death to perform in front of other people.
I always loved to sing. I had a great passion for music and for singing and for writing. I didn't have a desire to be on the stage.
However, she had no choice. Even at such a young age, she carried an enormous burden. Her singing was the only shred of happiness left in her mother's life, so she pushed herself for her mother's sake. But for Shania's mother, it wasn't just all about her own personal joy and happiness. There was a darker, more sinister motive behind it. She realized that her daughter's talent could be exploited to bring in much-needed money for the family. So, at just 8 years old, Shania's mother forced her to perform in bars. The pressure and responsibility on a girl so young was overwhelming. Not even a teenager yet, Shania was forced to help provide for the family. She would sometimes have to play in bars after closing hours and until 3 a.m. in the morning. Little could Shania ever imagine that somebody would be her. It was up to her to save her family, but there was no one to save her, especially not from her stepfather. As she developed into a young girl, his physical abuse turned sexual. Decades later, Shania would admit, "It was terrible. You didn't want to be a girl in my house." The utter shame and the psychological effect it had on her as a young girl was devastating. And so I hid myself, and I would flatten my boobs. I would wear bras that were too small for me, and I'd wear two, play it down until there was nothing girl about me. When Shania was just 13 years old, her mother was falling apart. She could no longer handle her abusive husband or the stress of living in such utter poverty. Her mother would confine herself to her bed, almost never leaving her room unless Shania's stepfather physically dragged her out. As she kicked and scrambled, cursing him to hell, my mother was in a bad state, half-dressed, not showered, pale and frail. My heart broke to see her like this. So one day, Shania simply packed everyone's bags, stuffed her mother and her siblings into the car, and forced her mother to drive. They drove about 10 hours straight until they reached Toronto, where they started a new life away from her stepfather. Life wasn't any easier, however, and the family still really struggled to survive. Her mother worked as a supper cook, and Shania was able to make money performing. In her late teens, her mother and stepfather reunited, and Shania also worked in his restoration business to help put food on the table. But when she was 22, an unspeakable tragedy hit the family. Shania and her siblings lost both their parents in a car accident. I fell apart, totally, just into shock for days, and I just couldn't let go of them. I lost a foundation. Whereas Shania had always helped to care for her siblings, she suddenly found herself to be their sole provider. It was the sudden loss of her parents, more than anything else, that drove her to succeed as a singer. However, her road to fame wasn't instant. It still took her 6 years before she finally released her first self-titled album in 1993. In that same year, she also married her first husband, Robert John Lang, who would later tear her heart to pieces and subject her to the most awful betrayal. But if Shania thought her days of sexual abuse and harassment was over, she was sourly mistaken. On multiple occasions, she had to fight off unwanted and sometimes forceful male attention in the music industry. This brought back many old demons from her horrible childhood, especially of the things her stepfather did to her. I was ashamed of being a girl. What was so natural for other people was so scary for me. I felt exploited. I had to play the glamorous singer, had to wear my femininity more openly, and feel so degraded. Despite being sexualized and portrayed as a sex symbol in the media, and in spite of critics and haters, Shania established herself as a force to be reckoned with in the country music scene. By 2002, she had released 4 studio albums and won multiple awards. But then, in 2003, tragedy struck again, and it threatened to end her career for good. Shania was starting to lose her voice, but at first she wasn't too worried. She put it down to the normal stress of her career and personal life. By now, she was also a proud mom to a 2-year-old boy, Aja. Shania decided to take some time off to rest and recover and to wait for her voice to come back naturally. But days turned to months, and months turned into years, and for the longest time, doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. Doctors eventually discovered that Shania's vocal cords had been damaged as a result of Lyme disease that she got from a tick bite. Much to her horror, her doctors told her that she might never be able to sing ever again. However, it could have been much worse. Shania was actually lucky not to have suffered much more severe symptoms.
It normally attacks your major organs. I mean, it's a terrible disease. It's debilitating and can be fatal.
And if all of that wasn't crushing enough, her marriage was also soon to be over. In 2008, Shania discovered that her husband had been cheating on her with a woman named Marie Ann. Marie Ann had been working as Shania's secretary, but even more than that, she had become Shania's closest friend. What made the wound so much deeper, however, was that while Shania suspected her husband was seeing another woman, she had been confiding in Marie Ann, who had assured her it was all in her head. Never in her wildest nightmares could Shania ever imagine that her best friend was the other woman. In the end, what hurt her the most was not the fact that her husband had cheated on her, but it was the betrayal from both her husband and her best friend that really cut her the deepest. In a strange twist of fate, from the broken pieces of her marriage, Shania found love again, and unless you know this bizarre story, you will never guess with who. Shania's burning suspicions of her husband's affair was first confirmed by Marie Ann's own husband, Frederick Thiebaud, who had also suspected that his wife was having an affair. Once he had all the evidence, he shared it with Shania. In their shared pain and grief, Shania and Fred found comfort in each other and soon even fell in love. Shania and her husband split in 2008 and finally settled their divorce in 2010. The very next year, she and Fred got married. Over the next few years, Shania bounced back slowly but surely. She worked on intense therapy to recover her voice and also her confidence. In 2017, after having disappeared for 15 years, Shania finally launched a new album, aptly called Now. In 2018, Shania underwent throat surgery to fix her damaged vocal cords, and in 2023, she released yet another album, Queen of Me. And for the album cover and promotional material, Shania finally found the courage and inner strength to overcome her lifelong body shame. She faced her fears and did a nude photo shoot. If you enjoyed this video, there's a good chance you'll also enjoy the one showing on your screen right now. Click, enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you on the next one.